Right now, Donald Trump is somewhere in one of his mansions counting his lucky stars. This man undoubtedly is the luckiest politician in the world right now. Donald Trump will win the US election in November just by sitting back and watching the Democrat train wreck unfold. Because it is over for Joe Biden. Today was the final test of his cognitive ability, and he failed as he resembled a waffling, confused, disjointed old man on the world stage. In fact, it was actually sad to watch. The president held his big boy press conference to try and prove that he is not a potato, to prove to Democrats that he is the man to lead them to victory after his disastrous performance at the presidential debate. But any hopes of salvaging his career were fatally dashed as he rambled on for almost an hour.
This is, investment in Russia. In China. I'm catching hell from my wife for that. Anyway. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, you'll see that our military is working. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, like I said.
It's like the lights are on, but there's nobody home. And at times, he didn't even know who he was.
I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military.
But it was this gaffe that sealed the deal.
What concerns do you have about Vice President Harris's ability to beat Donald Trump if she were at the top of the ticket?
Look, I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president because I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one. The fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
I mean, what do you say? It's just extraordinary. And that wasn't even the worst part of his day. Now, it's one thing to make a minor mix-up, but it is inconceivable to mix up the president of Ukraine with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway.
Oh, this is a disaster. It can't be palmed off as just another accidental slip-up because there are too many to count for the US president, especially when the stakes are so high. How much longer can his supporters seriously carry him like a baby? Nothing he says is taken seriously because nobody is listening to what he is actually saying. The world is waiting for him to stumble. Have a look at this mashed up image of a Vice President Kamala Harris / Donald Trump. The world is having a field day. They are on gaffe watch. And this is a man who is supposed to be the leader of the free world. Now, I've been thinking about what we learned from today's big boy press conference, but I've realised Biden has zero self-awareness about his cognitive decline. He can't see it and is oblivious to it. But it says more about those in his inner circle, including his drill sergeant, stage mum wife, Dr. Jill, than an old, frail old man who needs urgent help. I mean, he couldn't even comprehend the disaster of his presidential mix-up.
The Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, Putin. I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names. Look, guys.
And so more and more Democrats are coming forward, now suddenly in panic mode. So far, 16 House Democrats and 1 Senate Democrat have urged the president to step aside. A new poll shows 2/3 of Americans, including a majority of Joe Biden's own supporters, say he should step aside as his party's presumptive nominee. But Biden is still undermining the data. And chances are he isn't being shown the real statistics because his supporters, including Dr. Jill, have huddled around him and are limiting access that would be critical for him to make a decision about his future.
You earlier explained confidence in your vice president.
Yes.
If your team came back and showed you data that she would fare better against former President Donald Trump, would you reconsider your decision to stay in the race?
No, unless they came back and said, there's no way you can win. Me. No one's saying that. No poll says that.
It's just so creepy. And it's wrong. How long can Biden and his closest allies sit there and watch this very public, humiliating decline? It is embarrassing and really sad. The reaction from Biden's team today is very telling.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration.
Yes, Secretaries Blinken, Austin and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan looked as though their souls left their bodies in that moment. But this is a mess of their own making. As Adam Crichton writes in The Australian, talk in Washington has switched entirely to when and how to replace him, which isn't easy given he only can make that decision unless a majority of his cabinet decide to remove him using the 25th Amendment, a possibility still remote, but not as much as it might have been a week ago. So sure, he survived today. Just enough to stay in the race. But for how long? And I'm sure Dr. Jill has already told her husband,
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question.
So the hardest thing for Donald Trump right now is to be quiet, to sit back and watch it all unfold. And not talking is the hardest thing Trump will ever have to do.